The whiskey glass shattered against the wall just inches from Vivian Lockhart's head, shards raining down on the polished mahogany bar of the Silver Spur Saloon. It was a sweltering July evening in 1875, and Kingston, Nevada, had attracted more than its usual share of trouble as miners flush with silver strikes sought entertainment after weeks in the mountains. "I said dance for me, pretty thing," bellowed a red-faced miner, his beard wet with spilled liquor. "We paid good money to see more than just serving drinks." Vivian pressed her back against the bar, her emerald dress worn and mended in places, but still the finest she owned suddenly feeling too revealing under their hungry stares. 5 men had formed a half-circle around her, cutting off any path to escape. The regular bartender had stepped out, leaving her alone with these wolves. "Gentlemen," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice, "I serve drinks, I don't dance." "Mr. Holly's doesn't permit. Don't much care what Holly's permits," growled another man, reaching for her arm. His fingers barely grazed her sleeve when the saloon doors swung open with a bang that silenced the room. A tall figure stood backlit by the dying sunset, dust swirling around his boots. As he stepped forward, the lamplight revealed a man who carried himself with the quiet confidence that only came from having faced death and walked away. His dark hat was pulled low, but beneath it, piercing blue eyes surveyed the scene with cold calculation. "Evening," he said simply, his voice carrying a subtle southern drawl. His coat was open just enough to reveal a holstered Colt revolver. "Seems to me the lady isn't interested in your company." "This ain't your business, stranger," the largest of the miners slurred, turning to face the newcomer. The stranger moved with unexpected speed for a man of his size. In one fluid motion, he crossed the room and flipped a table in front of the miners, sending cards and chips flying. Before anyone could react, his revolver was drawn, hammer cocked. "I've just made it my business." His eyes remained fixed on the group as he addressed Vivian. "You all right, madam?" Vivian nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. She'd been in tough situations before a woman didn't survive 3 years working saloons without learning to handle unwanted attention, but this was different. These men were drunk enough to be dangerous, sober enough to mean it. The stranger kept his revolver level. "I'm feeling hospitable tonight, so I'm giving you boys one chance to leave peacefully." "There's 5 of us and one of you," said the red-faced miner, though he'd taken a step back. "Poor odds for you," the stranger replied without a trace of humor. "First man to move gets a third eye. Rest of you can visit Doc Williams after." A tense silence filled the room until the youngest of the miners, barely old enough to grow a proper beard, tugged at his companion's sleeve. "Come on, Jenks. Ain't worth dying over." Slowly, grudgingly, the men backed toward the door, muttering curses. The largest one stopped at the threshold. "We'll remember you, mister." "Good," said the stranger. "Save me the trouble of introducing myself next time." When the doors finally swung shut behind them, Vivian released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The stranger holstered his weapon and righted the overturned table with one hand. "Thank you," she said, quickly collecting herself and smoothing her dress. Mr. Holly stepped out and things escalated quickly. No need for thanks. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair with strands of premature silver at the temples. "Name's Rhett Tucker." He offered a brief nod instead of a handshake, maintaining a respectful distance. "Vivian Lockhart," she replied, moving behind the bar where she felt more secure. "Can I offer you a drink? On the house, of course. Whiskey." "Neat." He settled onto a bar stool, placing his hat beside him. His hands bore the calluses of hard work, but they were clean, his nails trimmed. Not a typical drifter. As she poured his drink, she studied him more carefully. His clothes were trail-worn but well-maintained. A small scar crossed his left eyebrow, and his face was tanned from long days under the sun. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, though his eyes spoke of someone who had seen more than most men twice his age. Not many men would step into a situation like that for a saloon girl, she remarked, sliding his drink across the bar. He took a measured sip before answering. Where I come from, a man doesn't stand by when a lady's in trouble, regardless of her occupation. Vivian smiled despite herself. And where exactly is that, Virginia? Though I haven't called it home since before the war. He glanced around the saloon. You work here alone most nights. No, Mr. Hollies is usually here. He owns the place. And there's Wilbur, the other bartender. Tonight was unusual. The saloon doors swung open again, causing Vivian to tense, but it was only Samuel Hollies, a portly man with mutton chop sideburns. He surveyed the empty saloon with dismay. Vivian, where is everyone? It's Saturday night. Before she could explain, Rhett stood and extended his hand to Hollies. Your establishment had some unwelcome patrons. I suggested they take their business elsewhere. Hollies frowned, looking from Rhett to Vivian. What happened? Some minors got handsy with Miss Lockhart, Rhett explained. I decided she was under my protection. Hollies' expression softened with understanding. Well, I appreciate you looking out for my employee, Mr. Tucker, Rhett Tucker. Any trouble I should know about? Hollies asked, glancing toward the door as if expecting the miners to return with reinforcements. Nothing permanent, Rhett assured him, though they might be nursing wounded pride for a spell. Hollies nodded, then turned to Vivian. You all right, girl? I'm fine, Mr. Hollies, just a bit shaken. Take the rest of the night off, with pay. He looked back at Rhett. Would you mind seeing Miss Lockhart safely to her lodgings, Mr. Tucker? I'd do it myself, but— I'd be honored, Rhett said, finishing his whiskey. If the lady permits. Vivian hesitated. Though grateful for his intervention, she knew better than to trust strangers too quickly in a town like Kingston. Still, something about his steady gaze reassured her. I'd appreciate the escort, Mr. Tucker. My boarding house is just 3 blocks from here. She retrieved her shawl from behind the bar and bid goodnight to Hollies, who was already lighting lamps to attract new customers. As they stepped onto the boardwalk, the night air had cooled, bringing relief from the day's heat. You don't have to walk me home, Vivian said once they were outside. I've made this walk 100 times. I've no doubt you're capable, Rhett replied, falling into step beside her. But those men seemed particularly determined. I'd rest easier knowing you arrived safely. They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of piano music and laughter fading behind them as they moved away from the saloon district toward the more respectable part of town. What brings you to Kingston, Mr. Tucker? Vivian finally asked. We don't get many visitors who aren't chasing silver or running from something. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Who says I'm not doing both, are you? Running from something? Aren't we all in some fashion? Vivian considered this. I suppose so. Though some of us run toward things too. And what are you running toward, Miss Lockhart? The question caught her off guard. Most men didn't ask saloon girls about their ambitions. Independence, she answered honestly. I've saved nearly enough to open a small dress shop. Another 6 months, God willing. Rhett nodded approvingly. A worthy goal. And you, what brings you here specifically? He was quiet for so long that Vivian thought he might not answer. I'm looking for work. Heard the Silver Crown mine was hiring guards after that payroll robbery last month. They are. 3 men were killed in that robbery. I know. I tracked the men responsible halfway across Nevada before losing their trail near Virginia City. Vivian stopped walking and turned to face him. You're a bounty hunter, among other things. Depends on what pays and what needs doing. They had reached her boarding house, a modest two-story building with a small porch. A single lamp burned in the window, left by the kindly widow who ran the establishment. "Well, Mr. Tucker, thank you for your protection tonight," Vivian said, extending her hand. He took it gently, his calloused palm warm against her fingers. "My pleasure, Miss Lockhart. Will you be in Kingston long? That depends on whether I find what I'm looking for." He released her hand and stepped back. "Good night, Miss Lockhart. Good night, Mr. Tucker." Vivian watched him walk away, his tall figure soon disappearing into the darkness. Only after she was inside did she realize he'd left without mentioning where he was staying, or if she would see him again. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of pristine Sunday that made even Kingston look almost respectable. Church bells rang in the distance as Vivian prepared for her day off. Unlike most saloon girls who worked 7 days a week, she had negotiated Sundays free when Holly's hired her a small concession to the religious upbringing she had left behind in St. Louis. She dressed simply in a blue calico dress, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. The boarding house was quiet as most residents attended church or slept off Saturday night's excesses. Vivian had other plans. Sunday was for her future visiting the small storefront she hoped to rent, reviewing her carefully maintained ledger of savings, and adding a few stitches to the dress designs she created in her sparse free time. The main street was mostly empty as she walked toward the business district. She found herself scanning the boardwalks for a glimpse of Rhett Tucker, then chided herself for the foolishness. Men like him drifted through towns like Kingston all the time. By now, he was probably miles away, chasing some other bounty. As she passed the sheriff's office, the door swung open and Sheriff James Everett stepped out, followed by none other than Rhett Tucker himself. Both men looked serious, and neither immediately noticed her. "I appreciate the information, Tucker," the sheriff was saying. "I'll telegraph the marshal in Carson City, see if they've heard anything about these fellas." "Much obliged, Sheriff." Rhett nodded, then caught sight of Vivian. Something like surprise, then pleasure crossed his face. "Miss Lockhart." "Mr. Tucker," she acknowledged, conscious of the sheriff's curious gaze. Sheriff Everett tipped his hat to her. "Morning, Miss Lockhart. I trust you're well today." "Very well, thank you, Sheriff. Mr. Tucker here was just telling me about an incident at the Silver Spur last night." "Those miners giving you trouble again?" "Nothing I couldn't handle with Mr. Tucker's assistance," she said diplomatically. Kingston was a town where a woman's reputation could be ruined by the slightest hint of impropriety, and even working in a saloon didn't exempt her from judgment. "Well, I'm glad to hear it." The sheriff gave Rhett an appraising look. "Tucker, if you're planning to stay in Kingston, I could use a deputy with your skills. The town council approved funding for another badge last month." Vivian watched Rhett consider the offer, surprised by how much she hoped he would accept. "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff," Rhett said after a moment, "but I've got business at the Silver Crown mine first. Perhaps after that's concluded." "Fair enough. The offer stands." Sheriff Everett nodded to them both and returned to his office. Left alone on the boardwalk, Vivian found herself suddenly tongue-tied, a sensation she hadn't experienced since her first days working the saloon. "I thought you might have left town already," she said finally. "Not without saying goodbye," Rhett replied. "I owe you that courtesy at least." "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Tucker." "Rhett," he corrected gently, "and perhaps I wanted an excuse to see you again." The directness of his statement brought a flush to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the climbing temperature. "Well, Rhett," she said, testing the familiarity of his given name, "since you're still in town, perhaps you join me for coffee. The cafe down the street serves a decent cup on Sundays." He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his normally stern features. "I'd like that very much, Vivian." The cafe was nearly empty when they arrived, most of the town's respectable citizens still at church. They found a table near the window, and a harried waitress quickly brought them coffee in chipped porcelain cups. "You mentioned Virginia," Vivian said after they were settled. "Did you fight in the war?" Rhett nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Confederate cavalry. Joined up in '62 when I was 18. Rode with Mosby's Rangers for a time." "The war's been over 10 years, Vivian observed. "You've been drifting all that time, more or less. Went home after Appomattox to find not much left. Family farm was burned, parents gone." He sipped his coffee. "Tried my hand at a few things: cattle driving in Texas, railroad work in Kansas, silver mining in Colorado, and bounty hunting. That came later. Turns out I have a knack for tracking men who don't want to be found." He changed the subject. "What about you? How does a lady like yourself end up serving whiskey in a Nevada saloon?" Vivian traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "My story's not so different from many women out here. Father died when I was 16. Mother remarried a man who—" She paused. "Let's just say he made it clear I should find my own way once I turned 18. So I did. Alone. That took courage, or desperation. Sometimes they look the same." She shrugged. "I started as a seamstress in St. Louis, but the pay was miserable. A friend suggested I try the saloon's better money, shorter hours. I've been working my way west ever since, saving for my shop." "And Kingston is your final stop?" "I hope so. It's growing fast enough to need a ladies' dress shop, but not so big that I couldn't make my mark." She smiled. "I sound foolish, don't I?" "Not at all," Rhett said seriously. "Dreams are what keep us moving forward when the past tries to drag us back." Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from personal histories to lighter topics: books they'd read, places they'd seen. Vivian couldn't remember the last time she'd simply talked with a man without calculating what he wanted from her or how to gracefully extricate herself from unwanted attention. When they finally left the cafe, the sun was high overhead. Rhett insisted on paying for their coffee despite her protests. "I should let you get on with your day," he said as they stepped back onto the boardwalk. "I've taken enough of your time." "It was time well spent," Vivian assured him. "Will you be at the Silver Spur tonight?" "I thought I might stop by. To ensure there's no repeat of last night's trouble, of course." "Of course," she echoed, smiling. "For protection purposes only, precisely." They parted ways at the corner, Vivian continuing toward the empty storefront that held her dreams, and Rhett heading toward the livery stable. She found herself looking back over her shoulder, only to discover he was doing the same. They shared a smile across the distance, and something warm settled in Vivian's chest, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. The rest of the day passed quickly. The storefront looked exactly as it had the previous Sunday, dusty and empty but full of possibility. Vivian spent an hour measuring the space and sketching plans in her notebook. Next came a visit to the general store to price fabric and notions, followed by lunch at her boarding house. By late afternoon, she was back in her small room, adding delicate embroidery to what she hoped would be the first dress sold in her new shop. As the light began to fade, she reluctantly set aside her sewing and prepared for her shift at the Silver Spur. Sunday nights were typically slower than Saturdays, but still busy enough to require her presence. She chose a burgundy dress that was less revealing than the emerald one, hoping to avoid a repeat of the previous evening's trouble. The saloon was half full when she arrived, with the usual mix of miners, cowboys, and townsmen seeking distraction before the working week began. Hollis nodded approvingly at her punctuality, and Wilbur, the weathered old bartender, winked as she took her place behind the bar. "Heard you had some excitement last night," he commented as he polished glasses. "News travels fast," she replied, tying on her apron. "Small town." Wilbur glanced toward the door. "That fella who helped you, he's standing outside, been there about 10 minutes. Looks like he's working up the courage to come in." Vivian resisted the urge to look. "Mr. Tucker doesn't strike me as a man who lacks courage." "Maybe it's not the coming in that's got him troubled," Wilbur said with another wink. "Maybe it's the seeing you part." Before she could respond, the saloon doors opened, and Rhett entered. He'd changed his dusty trail clothes for a clean shirt and vest, though he still wore his gun belt. His eyes found her immediately, and he offered a slight nod as he made his way to the bar. "Evening," he said, settling onto a stool. "Mr. Tucker," she greeted him formally, aware of Wilbur's interested gaze. "Whiskey, please." She poured his drink, their fingers brushing briefly as she passed him the glass. A small contact, but it sent a current through her arm that she hadn't expected. "Quiet night," he observed. "So far. Sunday usually is." She busied herself arranging bottles on the shelf behind the bar. "Did you visit the mine today?" "I did. They're hiring guards for the next payroll shipment. Leaves in 2 weeks. You took the job, for now. Pays well, and I have reason to believe the men I'm tracking might try for this shipment too." Their conversation was interrupted as a group of cowboys entered the saloon, laughing and calling for drinks. Vivian moved away to serve them, feeling Rhett's eyes on her as she worked. Throughout the evening, they exchanged glances and brief words whenever she passed his position at the bar. He nursed his drink slowly, clearly more interested in watching her than in the alcohol. As the night wore on, patrons began to drift out. Rhett remained, occasionally exchanging words with Hollies or Wilbur, but mostly keeping to himself. When the last customer besides Rhett had departed, Hollies counted the night's earnings and bid them good night, leaving Wilbur to close up. "I can finish here," the old bartender told Vivian. "You go on home. Your gentleman friend can walk you." "He's not Vivian began, but Wilbur was already shooing her out from behind the bar. "Course he ain't," Wilbur chuckled. "And I ain't been watching him watch you all night neither." Rhett stood as Vivian gathered her shawl. "I'd be honored to escort you home again, Miss Lockhart, if you'll permit it." "Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I'd appreciate that." The night air was cooler than the previous evening, with a breeze that carried the scent of sage from the surrounding hills. They walked in comfortable silence for a time, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. "You're good at what you do," Rhett said eventually. "I watched you handle those cowboys tonight. You have a way of making each man feel special without encouraging impropriety." Vivian laughed softly. "That's the job, isn't it? To make them feel seen without letting them see too much. It can't be easy." "It isn't. But it pays better than seamstress work, and I need the money for my shop." She glanced at him. "Does it bother you, what I do?" Rhett considered this. "I've known many women who worked saloons. Some by choice, some because life left them few options. I'm not one to judge how folks survive. That's more understanding than most men I meet. I've made my own compromises over the years," he admitted. "Done things I'm not proud of to keep moving forward." They reached her boarding house too quickly. As they stopped at the front steps, Vivian found herself reluctant to say good night. "Will I see you tomorrow?" she asked. "I'll be around." "Need to make arrangements at the mine, stock up on supplies." He hesitated. "Perhaps we could have dinner. There's a restaurant at the hotel that's supposed to be decent." The invitation surprised her. Men occasionally bought her drinks at the saloon or offered to take her to hotel rooms, but a proper dinner was different, something people did when courting. "I'd like that," she said before she could overthink it. "I'm free until 7. I'll call for you at 5 then." He tipped his hat. "Good night," Vivian. Good night, Rhett. This time, she watched until he disappeared completely from view, wondering what exactly she was getting herself into. The next morning brought a surprise in the form of a telegram from St. Louis. Vivian rarely received mail, having cut ties with most of her past when she left Missouri. She opened the yellow paper with trepidation, scanning the brief message: shop space available, stop investor willing to back woman dressmaker, stop excellent opportunity, stop wire, immediately if interested, stop. Regards, Alina Wilson. Alina had been her employer at the dress shop in St. Louis, a stern but fair woman who had recognized Vivian's talent with a needle. They had parted on good terms when Vivian decided to head west, but they hadn't corresponded in over a year. The telegram presented an unexpected dilemma. St. Louis offered a larger customer base, the backing of an investor, and the comfort of familiarity. It was exactly the opportunity she had been working toward, but in the wrong place. She tucked the telegram into her pocket, deciding to think about it later. Today was for errands and preparation for her dinner with Rhett, not life-altering decisions. The day passed quickly. Vivian visited the bank to deposit her previous night's earnings, then spent an hour at the general store selecting thread and fabric for a special order dress for the mayor's wife. By mid-afternoon, she was back in her room, trying to decide what to wear for dinner. Her wardrobe was limited. One couldn't pack much when traveling alone by stagecoach, but she had managed to keep one dress that wasn't meant for saloon work. The blue silk had been a splurge in Denver, purchased for a theater outing that never materialized when her escort canceled at the last minute. She'd kept it anyway, a reminder of the kind of life she hoped to have someday. At precisely 5 o'clock, Mrs. Winters, the boarding house owner, knocked on her door. "There's a gentleman caller for you, Miss Lockhart. Quite handsome, too," she added with a knowing smile. Vivian found Rhett waiting in the small parlor, hat in hand. He wore a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, making her wonder if he'd purchased it specifically for this occasion. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you." She accepted his offered arm, nodding goodbye to Mrs. Winters, whose expression suggested she would have plenty to discuss with her other boarders that evening. The Kingston Hotel was the finest establishment in town, a 3-story brick building with actual glass windows and a small dining room that served decent food to travelers and the occasional local celebrating a special occasion. As they entered, Vivian was conscious of the curious glances from other diners. A known saloon girl dining with a stranger was bound to start tongues wagging. The maitre d' seated them at a corner table, relatively private compared to the more central locations. Rhett held her chair with an old-world courtesy that spoke of his southern upbringing. "I hope this is acceptable," he said as he took his own seat. "I'm not familiar with Kingston's better establishments yet." "It's more than acceptable," Vivian assured him. "I've only dined here once before, when Mr. Hollies treated the staff to Christmas dinner last year." Their conversation flowed as easily as it had at the cafe, though Vivian found herself more aware of their surroundings. Between courses, she caught sight of Beatrice Chambers, wife of the bank manager, whispering to her companion while glancing in their direction. "We're causing a stir," she murmured to Rhett. He followed her gaze, then shrugged. "Let them talk. I'm enjoying the company too much to care what Kingston's finest think." His nonchalance relaxed her. By the time dessert arrived, a surprisingly good apple tart, Vivian had almost forgotten about the other diners. "I received a telegram today," she said as they finished their coffee. "From a former employer in St. Louis. She's offering to help me open a dress shop there with financial backing." Rhett's expression revealed nothing. "That sounds like the opportunity you've been working toward." "It is, or at least it should be." But Vivian sighed. But I've spent 3 years planning for Kingston. I know this town. I've made connections, saved for a specific space. She hesitated. And now there are other considerations. Their eyes met across the table, and Vivian knew he understood what she wasn't saying. Whatever was growing between them, neither was ready to name it yet, but it was becoming a factor in her calculations. "What will you do?" he asked. "I don't know yet. I have time to decide. The offer doesn't expire immediately." Rhett nodded. "Sometimes the right path isn't clear until you're already walking it." After dinner, they strolled through town, taking the long route back to her boarding house. The main street was quiet, most businesses closed for the evening. As they passed the telegraph office, Rhett suddenly stiffened. "What is it?" Vivian asked, sensing his change in demeanor. "The men from the saloon. Saturday night." His voice was low. "They're across the street, watching us." Vivian followed his gaze and saw them, the 5 miners who had cornered her, now standing in the shadows of an alleyway. The largest one, Jenks, she remembered, spat on the ground as they passed. "Ignore them," she said, but Rhett had already shifted his position, placing himself between her and the miners. "Keep walking," he instructed quietly. "I don't want trouble, but I won't have them threatening you." They continued down the street, Rhett's hand now resting near his holstered revolver. Vivian could feel the miners' eyes following them, but the men made no move to approach. "They're just trying to intimidate us," she said once they were out of earshot. "Maybe." Rhett didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe they're planning something. Men like that don't take kindly to being shown up, especially in front of a woman." "You're worried they'll come after you." "I can handle myself. It's you I'm concerned about. They know where you work, where you live." They had reached her boarding house, but instead of saying good night, Rhett glanced up and down the street, his expression troubled. "I don't like leaving you here," he admitted. Those men had hatred in their eyes. "Mrs. Winters keeps the doors locked at night," Vivian assured him. "And I'm on the 2nd floor." Rhett still looked unconvinced. "I'll speak to Sheriff Everett tomorrow, let him know there might be trouble. In the meantime, be careful. Don't walk alone if you can help it." "I won't," she promised, touched by his concern. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I had a wonderful evening, Vivian." "As did I." She hesitated, then leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. "Thank you." The gesture seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath, his eyes searching hers with a question neither was ready to ask. "Good night," she whispered, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "Good night," he echoed, waiting until she was safely inside before turning away. That night, Vivian dreamed of St. Louis and Kingston, of dress shops and saloons, of miners with hateful eyes and a tall Virginian with a steady gaze. When she woke, the telegram still lay on her nightstand, demanding an answer she wasn't ready to give. The next few days established a pattern. Rhett visited the Silver Spur each evening, sitting at the bar and nursing a single whiskey while Vivian worked. After her shift, he would walk her home, their conversations growing deeper and more personal with each passing night. She learned that he had a younger sister living in Richmond, that he'd once wanted to be a doctor before the war changed everything, that he could recite Shakespeare from memory, a skill taught by his mother, who had been a schoolteacher. In turn, she told him about growing up in St. Louis, about her father who had encouraged her interest in dressmaking, about the dreams she still harbored despite the detours her life had taken. On Thursday evening, Rhett arrived at the saloon earlier than usual, his expression grave. He motioned her to a quiet corner when there was a lull in customers. "The payroll shipment has been moved up," he told her. "We leave tomorrow at dawn, should be back by Sunday if all goes well." Vivian felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Is it dangerous? Could be. The men I've been tracking hit 3 payroll shipments in the last 6 months. They're organized, well-armed. And you think they'll try for this one? I'm counting on it, he said grimly. It's why I took the job. These men killed innocent guards, Vivian. They need to answer for that. She wanted to ask him not to go, to forget about bounties and justice and stay in Kingston where it was safe. But she knew that wasn't who he was. Be careful, she said instead. I've grown rather accustomed to your company, Mr. Tucker. I'd hate to lose it now. He smiled, reaching out to briefly touch her hand where it rested on the bar. I'll be back before you know it, and when I return, perhaps we could discuss future arrangements. Future arrangements, she repeated, her pulse quickening. I've been offered a permanent position as deputy here in Kingston. Sheriff Everett seems to think I'd be an asset to the town. And what do you think? I think I've been drifting long enough. His eyes held hers. I think I might have found a reason to stay in one place. Before she could respond, a group of ranch hands entered the saloon, demanding drinks and breaking the moment. Rhett moved back to his usual spot at the bar while Vivian attended to the new customers, her mind spinning with the implications of their conversation. Later, as they walked to her boarding house, a comfortable silence fell between them. When they reached her door, Rhett took both her hands in his. I wanted to give you this before I leave, he said, producing a small revolver from his coat pocket. It's loaded, 5 shots. Vivian stared at the weapon. Rhett, I don't, please, he insisted. Those miners have been watching the saloon. I've seen them. They're waiting for something, and with me gone. He pressed the revolver into her hand. Keep it with you. I've shown Wilbur and Holly's their faces. They'll be on alert, but just in case. She accepted the weapon reluctantly. I've never fired a gun before. Point and squeeze the trigger. Aim for the center of the body. It's the largest target. His hands lingered on hers. I don't mean to frighten you. I just want you safe until I return. I understand. She tucked the revolver into her reticule. When do you leave? First light. The mine's sending 6 guards plus the driver and shotgun rider. Will you come say goodbye? He shook his head regretfully. We muster at the mine at dawn. I won't have time. Vivian nodded, fighting disappointment. Then I suppose this is goodbye for now. For now, he agreed, his voice low. He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down until his lips met hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened. Vivian responded with a fervor that surprised them both, her hands gripping the lapels of his coat as if to keep him anchored to this spot, to this moment. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Rhett rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you. What took you so long? She whispered, making him laugh. A gentleman doesn't kiss a lady without proper courtship. And is that what we're doing? Courting, he pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. If you'll have me, yes. I'll think about it, she teased, then grew serious. Come back safely, Rhett. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her once more, briefly. Wait for me. I will. She watched him walk away, a tall silhouette against the night sky, and wondered if this was what it felt like to find something worth staying for. The next 3 days dragged by with excruciating slowness. Vivian kept busy at the saloon, carried the revolver everywhere as promised, and tried not to worry. The miners who had caused trouble hadn't returned to the Silver Spur, but twice she spotted them watching her from across the street as she walked to work. On Saturday night, the saloon was particularly busy, filled with miners celebrating the end of their shift and cowboys in from the surrounding ranches. Vivian moved efficiently between tables, serving drinks and deflecting propositions with practiced ease. She had just delivered a bottle of rye to a table of card players when the saloon doors swung open. A hush fell over the room as three men entered, their clothes trail worn and dusty. Two were unfamiliar, but the third was Jenks, the large miner who had cornered her the previous weekend. "Well, look who it is, boys," Jenks called, his voice carrying across the room. "The high and mighty Saloon girl. Where's your protector tonight, sweetheart? Off playing hero somewhere else?" Vivian ignored him, moving behind the bar where Wilbur stood watching the newcomers with narrowed eyes. "Maybe we should go," one of Jenks's companions muttered, but Jenks waved him off. "Ain't no reason to leave. That fancy-talking Southerner ain't here to stop us having a good time." He approached the bar, leaning on it heavily. "Whiskey. The good stuff this time." Wilbur started to reach for a bottle, but Vivian placed a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry, sir," she said to Jenks, keeping her voice level. "Mr. Hollies has requested that you take your business elsewhere. There are several other establishments in town that might better suit your needs." Jenks's face darkened. "Is that right? And who's going to make us leave?" "You," he laughed, a harsh sound that grated on her nerves. "Your boyfriend's not here to protect you now, is he?" "She doesn't need protection," came a new voice from behind the bar. Mr. Hollies had emerged from the back room, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "But I'm happy to provide it all the same. Gentlemen, I must insist you leave my establishment." The saloon had gone completely silent, every patron watching the confrontation unfold. Jenks's companions shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting no part of a standoff with a shotgun-wielding saloon owner. "Come on, Jenks," one of them urged. "It ain't worth it." For a tense moment, Jenks stared at Hollies, then at Vivian, hatred burning in his bloodshot eyes. Finally, he spat on the floor. "This ain't over," he growled, backing toward the door. Not by a long shot. When the three men had gone, conversation slowly resumed in the saloon. Hollies lowered the shotgun, looking shaken despite his brave front. "You all right, Vivian?" he asked. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she poured a shot of whiskey for a waiting customer. "Thank you for stepping in." "I should have done the same last weekend," Hollies admitted. "Tucker was right about those men, they're trouble." The rest of the night passed without incident, but Vivian couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. When closing time came, both Hollies and Wilbur insisted on escorting her home, despite her protests that she could manage alone. "Tucker would have my hide if anything happened to you," Wilbur said gruffly. "Man's sweet on you, plain as day." Vivian couldn't deny it, nor could she deny her own feelings. In just a week, Rhett Tucker had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The thought of him facing danger on the payroll route while she dealt with threats in Kingston tied her stomach in knots. Sunday dawned gray and overcast, matching Vivian's mood. According to Rhett, the payroll shipment should return that day, but she had no way of knowing when or if he was safe. She tried to distract herself with sewing, working on a new dress design until her fingers ached, but her thoughts kept straying to Rhett and the danger he might be facing. By mid-afternoon, unable to stand the confinement of her room any longer, she decided to visit her future shop space. Perhaps being surrounded by her dreams would calm the anxiety that had plagued her since Rhett's departure. The streets were relatively quiet as she made her way toward the business district. Sunday was a day of rest for most in Kingston, with only the churches and a few businesses open. She had just turned onto Pine Street when she heard footsteps behind her. Well, look who's out for a stroll." Vivian's blood ran cold at the sound of Jenks's voice. She quickened her pace without looking back, her hand moving to her reticule where Rhett's revolver lay. "Don't be rude now," Jenks called, his footsteps accelerating to match hers. "I just want to talk." She could hear that he wasn't alone. At least two sets of footsteps followed her. The street ahead was empty, The shop fronts closed for Sunday. With sudden clarity, she realized they had been watching, waiting for her to be alone. "I have nothing to say to you," she said, still walking briskly, eyes scanning for anyone who might help. "That's a shame, because I have plenty to say to you." Jenks had drawn even with her now, walking uncomfortably close. "Your boyfriend made a fool of me in front of the whole town. That kind of thing has consequences." Vivian stopped walking and faced him directly, her hand still in her reticule. "Mr. Tucker isn't my boyfriend, and whatever grievance you have with him has nothing to do with me." Jenks laughed, and his two companions, the same men from the saloon the previous night, spread out to flank her. "See, that's where you're wrong. He cares about you, which makes you useful to me." "Sheriff Everett's office is just 2 blocks from here," Vivian warned, though in truth it was farther. "If you lay a hand on me, Sheriff's out of town," Jenks interrupted with a grin. "Rode out to the Brannigan Ranch this morning. Won't be back till evening." Vivian felt a chill run through her. They'd planned this carefully. "What do you want?" she asked, stalling for time, hoping anyone would come along. "I want your southern gentleman to know what happens when he interferes with my business." Jenks nodded to his companions. "Take her arms." As the men moved toward her, Vivian pulled the revolver from her reticule and aimed it squarely at Jenks's chest, just as Rhett had instructed. "Stay back." The men froze, surprised by the appearance of the weapon. Jenks's smirk faltered slightly. "You won't shoot," he said, though he made no move to approach her. "Nice ladies don't shoot men in the street." "I'm not a nice lady," Vivian replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm a saloon girl with a loaded gun and nothing to lose. Now back away before I decide 5 years in prison for shooting you is a fair trade." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of Jenks's companions, the younger one, took a step back. "Jenks, let's go. This ain't worth getting shot over." "Shut up," Jenks snapped, his eyes never leaving Vivian. "She won't pull that trigger." "Care to bet your life on it?" came a familiar voice from behind Vivian. Rhett stepped into view, his own revolver trained on Jenks. He looked trail-worn and tired, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw, but his aim was steady. "Tucker," Jenks growled. "Should have known you'd show up to play hero again." "Step away from the lady," Rhett ordered. "Now." Jenks glanced from Rhett to Vivian, then at his increasingly nervous companions. Slowly he raised his hands. "No need for bloodshed. We were just having a friendly conversation." "That's not how it looked to me," Rhett said coldly. "I heard you threaten Miss Lockhart. That's assault in any court in Nevada. Your word against mine." "And mine," Vivian added, the revolver still pointed at Jenks's chest. Jenks spat on the ground. "Fine. We're leaving, but this ain't over, Tucker." "Yes, it is," Rhett countered. "Because if I ever see you within 100 yards of Miss Lockhart again, I'll kill you. That's not a threat, it's a promise from a man who's kept everyone he's ever made." Something in Rhett's voice, a cold certainty that sent shivers down even Vivian's spine, seemed to convince Jenks that further confrontation would be unwise. He backed away slowly, his companions following suit, until they reached the corner and disappeared from view. Only then did Vivian lower the revolver, her hand suddenly shaking so badly that Rhett had to gently take the weapon from her. "You're back," she said, a tremor in her voice. "You're safe." "I'm back," he confirmed, holstering his own weapon before taking her into his arms. She went willingly, burying her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of dust and leather and something uniquely him. "How did you find me?" she asked when she could trust her voice again. "I went to the boarding house first. Mrs. Winters said you'd gone out. I was heading to the saloon when I spotted you with those men." His arms tightened around her. "I should never have left you alone. You couldn't have known they'd try something like this." She pulled back to look at him. The payroll shipment was their trouble. A shadow crossed his face. Yes. They hit us in the pass, just as I expected. 2 guards were wounded, but we drove them off. He hesitated. I recognized one of them, Vivian, the leader of the group. Who was it? Jenks. Rhett's jaw tightened. He's not just some drunk miner with a grudge. He's the ringleader I've been tracking for months. The payroll robberies, the murdered guards, it was all him. Vivian felt cold despite the warmth of Rhett's embrace. Then just now, he wasn't after you because of me, or at least not only because of me. He was eliminating a witness who could connect him to the robberies. Rhett shook his head. I should have seen it sooner. The timing of their appearance at the saloon, right after I arrived in town looking for the robbers, it wasn't coincidence. What do we do now? We go to the sheriff as soon as he returns. I have enough evidence now to convince him, especially with your testimony about today's threats. Rhett brushed a strand of hair from her face. In the meantime, I'm not letting you out of my sight. Despite the lingering fear from her encounter with Jenks, Vivian felt a warmth spread through her at his words. That might cause some talk in a town like Kingston. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I think we're past worrying about talk, don't you? She nodded, then suddenly remembered something. The telegram from St. Louis. I never replied. Have you decided what you'll do? I have. She took a deep breath. I'm staying in Kingston. My future is here now. The look of joy that spread across Rhett's face was worth any opportunity she might be giving up in St. Louis. He pulled her close again, this time capturing her lips in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Vivian Lockhart. I know it's fast and maybe foolish, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling right, natural. And I've never been one to question good fortune when it comes my way. They walked hand in hand back to her boarding house, discussing plans to meet with Sheriff Everett as soon as he returned. Rhett insisted on staying with her until then, propriety be damned. Jenks won't give up easily, he warned as they sat in the small parlor, Mrs. Winters having been persuaded to allow the improper visit given the circumstances. He's desperate now, and desperate men are dangerous. We'll be careful, Vivian assured him, though privately she feared what Jenks might do next. Tell me about the deputy position. Did you accept it? Not officially. I wanted to talk to you first. Why, it's your decision. Rhett took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm as had become his habit. Because it affects you too, Vivian. If I take the badge, I'll be staying in Kingston permanently, and I hope. He paused, suddenly looking uncertain. I hope that means we'll be building a life together. Vivian's heart raced at the implication. Are you asking what I think you're asking, Rhett Tucker? I don't have a ring yet, he admitted. And I know it's been less than 2 weeks since we met. But I've lived enough to know when something is right, and this us it's right. She squeezed his hand. Yes, yes. He looked startled, as if he hadn't expected an answer so quickly. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, you should take the deputy position. Yes to all of it. She smiled at his expression. I've also lived enough to know when something is right. And you, Rhett Tucker, are the rightest thing that's ever happened to me. His answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made Mrs. Winters clear her throat loudly as she passed the parlor door. They spent the afternoon making plans for the dress shop she would open, for the small house they might rent on Cedar Street, for the life they would build together in Kingston. When Sheriff Everett finally returned at dusk, they were ready with their story and evidence about Jenks. The sheriff listened gravely, taking notes as Rhett detailed the connection between Jenks and the payroll robberies. When they finished, he shook his head in disgust. I should have known. He came to town 6 months ago, right around when the robberies started. He looked at Rhett. "You still interested in that deputy position, Tucker? Because I could use a man with your instincts." Rhett glanced at Vivian, who nodded encouragingly. "I am, Sheriff. In fact, I'm planning to make Kingston my permanent home. Miss Lockhart has agreed to become Mrs. Tucker." Sheriff Everett grinned. "Well, congratulations to you both, though I can't say I'm surprised the whole town's been talking about you too." He stood, strapping on his gun belt. "Now, let's go find Jenks and his boys. I want them in custody before they can cause any more trouble." With Rhett temporarily deputized, the three of them set out for the mining camp, where Jenks and his companions were known to stay. The sun had set, and lanterns glowed in windows throughout Kingston as they passed through town. "Stay close," Rhett instructed Vivian as they approached the outskirts. "Sheriff, with all due respect, Miss Lockhart should perhaps wait at your office." "I'm not leaving you," Vivian said firmly. "Besides, I'm the one he threatened directly. You might need my testimony to make the charges stick." Rhett looked like he wanted to argue but nodded reluctantly. "Just stay behind us when we reach the camp." The mining camp was a collection of tents and crude shacks on the edge of town, lit by scattered campfires. Most of the inhabitants were honest working men, but it also attracted those who preferred to live beyond the reach of the law. Sheriff Everett led them to a tent at the far edge of the camp. "This is where Jenks and his boys have been staying," he explained in a low voice. "3 of them total from what I've heard." Rhett drew his revolver, motioning for Vivian to stay back. "Sheriff, you take the front. I'll circle around in case they try to run." As Rhett disappeared into the darkness, Sheriff Everett approached the tent, one hand on his holstered weapon. "Jenks, this is Sheriff Everett. Come out with your hands up." There was no response from the tent. The sheriff glanced at Vivian, who stood several paces back, her heart pounding. "Jenks," Sheriff Everett called again. "You and your boys are under arrest for attempted robbery of the Silver Crown payroll and threatening a citizen of Kingston. Come out now." Still no response. With a nod to Vivian to stay put, the sheriff cautiously approached the tent flap and pulled it aside, revolver drawn. "Empty," he announced after a moment. "They've cleared out. Recently 2 fires still warm." Rhett appeared from the darkness behind the tent. "No sign of them back there." "But they left in a hurry. There's half-eaten food, abandoned belongings." "They could be anywhere by now," the sheriff said grimly. "I'll telegraph the surrounding towns, put out alerts. They won't have gone far," Rhett predicted. "Jenks has unfinished business here." Vivian shivered, not from the night air but from the certainty in Rhett's voice. "You think he'll come after us?" "I know he will." Rhett moved to her side, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. "But we'll be ready." They returned to town, where Sheriff Everett drafted telegrams to neighboring communities, and Rhett officially accepted the deputy position. It was agreed that Vivian would stay at the sheriff's office that night, where both men could ensure her safety. A cot was set up in a small room normally used for storage, while Rhett and the sheriff took turns keeping watch. Despite the uncomfortable accommodations, Vivian slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that Rhett was nearby. She woke to sunlight streaming through a small window and the smell of coffee brewing. "Morning," Rhett greeted her as she emerged from the back room. He looked tired but alert, a deputy's badge now pinned to his vest. "Coffee, please." She accepted the tin cup gratefully. "Any word on Jenks?" "Nothing yet. Sheriff's making rounds, checking if anyone's seen them." He sat beside her on the rough wooden bench that served as the office's only furniture apart from the sheriff's desk. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected." She sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of her cup. "You look good with that badge." He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm sorry about all this, Vivian. This isn't how I wanted to start our life together." "Don't apologize. None of this is your fault." She set down her cup and took his hand. Besides, every good story needs a little excitement, doesn't it? Something to tell our grandchildren someday. That earned her a genuine smile. Grandchildren, is it? We're planning that far ahead already. I like to be thorough in my preparations, she teased, then grew serious. What happens now? We wait. Jenks can't have gone far. He doesn't have the resources for a long journey. And like I said, he has unfinished business here. With us. With me, Rhett corrected. You're just caught in the middle because of me. Vivian shook her head. I'm exactly where I want to be. And we'll face whatever comes together. Rhett leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Together, he agreed. Sheriff Everett returned mid-morning with news that no one had seen Jenks or his companion since the previous day. It's like they vanished, he reported, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. But every stage driver and livery stable owner is on alert. They won't get far. The day passed slowly. Vivian sent word to Mr. Holly's that she wouldn't be working that evening, and Rhett made arrangements for them to stay at the Kingston Hotel until the threat was resolved. By late afternoon, they had moved to a small but clean room at the hotel, with Sheriff Everett promising to keep watch in the lobby. I don't like being cooped up like this, Vivian admitted as they sat by the window, watching the street below. It feels like we're hiding. We're being cautious, Rhett corrected. Jenks is dangerous, Vivian. He's killed before and he won't hesitate to do it again. I know, she sighed, turning from the window to face him. But we can't live like this indefinitely. At some point we have to get on with our lives. Rhett took her hands in his. We will, I promise. Once Jenks is captured, we'll start building the life we talked about, the dress shop, the house on Cedar Street, all of it. And in the meantime, I'm going to keep you safe. He smiled, trying to lighten the mood. And perhaps we should discuss wedding plans, unless you've changed your mind. Not a chance. She squeezed his hands. Though we might need to wait until this business with Jenks is resolved, I'd prefer not to have armed guards at our wedding. I don't know. Might make for an interesting ceremony. Rhett's expression grew serious again. I meant what I said yesterday, Vivian. I love you. Whatever happens with Jenks, that won't change. I love you too. She leaned forward to kiss him, a brief but tender gesture. And nothing is going to stop us from having our future together. Not Jenks, not anyone. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Rhett immediately drew his revolver, motioning for Vivian to move behind him. Who is it? He called. Sheriff Everett, came the response. Got news. Rhett opened the door cautiously, relaxing only when he confirmed it was indeed the sheriff. What's happened? Sheriff Everett entered, removing his hat. One of Jenks's men was spotted at the livery stable trying to purchase horses. He ran when my deputy approached, but we know they're still in town. Did he say anything? Give any indication of their plans? Rhett asked. Nothing specific, but the timing is concerning. Sheriff Everett glanced at Vivian. The Silver Crown mine is sending another payroll shipment tomorrow. Smaller than the last one, but still substantial. Rhett's expression hardened. They're planning to hit it. That would be my guess. And with you out of commission watching over Miss Lockhart, they probably figure their chances are good. A heavy silence fell over the room as they considered the implications. Finally, Rhett spoke. They're using Vivian as a distraction. They know I won't leave her unprotected, which means one less gun against them tomorrow. Exactly, the sheriff agreed. It's clever in a twisted way. Vivian looked between the two men. So what do? We turn their plan against them, Rhett said slowly, an idea forming. Sheriff, when exactly does the payroll shipment leave tomorrow? Dawn. They're hoping to make it through the pass before noon when visibility is best. And how many guards will be riding with it? 4, plus the driver and shotgun rider. Rhett nodded, thinking. Not enough if Jenks and his boys are planning an ambush, but what if we set our own trap? Let them think their plan is working, that I'm stuck here protecting Vivian, then surprise them at the ambush point. Sheriff Everett considered this. Could work. We know the most likely spot for an ambush, that narrow section of trail just before the pass. I could position men there tonight, have them hidden and waiting. Meanwhile, I make very public appearances around town with Vivian today, making sure Jenks's remaining man sees us together. Let them think I'm completely focused on her protection. And where will I be during all this? Vivian asked, not liking the direction of the conversation. Safe at the sheriff's office with his most trusted deputy, Rhett answered. I won't risk you being anywhere near the ambush point. I don't like being used as bait, she protested. And I like even less the idea of you riding into an ambush, even if you're expecting it. It's the best way to end this quickly and decisively, Rhett argued gently. Jenks won't stop coming after us until he's caught or permanently stopped. This may be our only chance. Vivian wanted to object further, but saw the determination in both men's eyes. This was what they did: faced danger, protected others. And Rhett was right, Jenks wouldn't stop until the situation was resolved one way or another. Fine, she conceded reluctantly. But you have to promise me you'll be careful. I haven't agreed to marry a dead hero, Rhett Tucker. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I promise. I have too much to live for now. The plan was set in motion immediately. Sheriff Everett left to assemble a team of trusted deputies and volunteers, while Rhett and Vivian made a point of being seen around town dining at the hotel restaurant, walking along the main street, even visiting her future shop space. All the while, Rhett maintained a watchful eye for any sign of Jenks or his companions. By evening, they had returned to the sheriff's office, where Vivian would spend the night under guard while Rhett joined the men waiting at the ambush point. As the time for his departure approached, Vivian found herself growing increasingly anxious. I still don't like this plan, she said as they stood in the sheriff's private office, away from the deputies preparing in the main room. There are too many things that could go wrong. We've thought of everything we can, Rhett assured her, checking his revolver one last time before holstering it. Sheriff Everett has good men with him. We'll be ready. And if you're not, if Jenks has more men than you expect, or if he set his own trap. Rhett took her hands, his expression serious. Then we adjust. I didn't survive the war and 10 years of bounty hunting by being careless, Vivian. I don't intend to start now, not when I finally have something worth living for. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. Vivian clung to him, memorizing the feel of him, the scent of him, terrified that this might be the last time. I love you, she whispered against his shoulder. Come back to me. Always, he promised, kissing her deeply before reluctantly pulling away. Get some rest. By this time tomorrow, all of this will be over, and we can start our life together properly. Vivian watched from the window as Rhett and the other men rode out of town, their figures growing smaller until they disappeared into the darkness. The young deputy left to guard her, a fresh-faced boy named Bailey, offered awkward condolences. Don't you worry, Miss Lockhart. Deputy Tucker's the best shot in the territory. He'll be just fine. Vivian nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She retreated to the small back room where a cot had been prepared, but sleep eluded her. Every creak of the building, every distant sound from the street outside had her sitting up, heart pounding. Hours passed. The oil lamp burned low, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the town grew quiet as respectable citizens retired for the night and even the saloons closed their doors. Still, Vivian remained awake, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. A soft thud from the main office caught her attention. She sat up, listening intently. Deputy Bailey should be at his desk, but she heard no movement, no reassuring scrape of a chair or rustle of papers. "Deputy," she called softly, reaching for Rhett's revolver, which she'd kept close. No response. Slowly, Vivian stood, the revolver gripped tightly in her hand. She approached the door, pressing her ear against it. Silence, then a barely audible whisper that froze her blood. "Check the back room. She's got to be in there." Jenks. He'd found her. Vivian backed away from the door, her mind racing. The room had a single window, small but perhaps large enough for her to squeeze through. She moved toward it silently, setting the revolver down just long enough to test the latch. The door handle turned behind her. In one fluid motion, Vivian grabbed the revolver, spun around, and aimed it at the door as it swung open. Jenks stood in the doorway, a bloody knife in his hand. Well, looks like the lady's ready for us," he sneered. Behind him, Vivian could see Deputy Bailey slumped over his desk, motionless. "Put down the gun, girl. You're coming with us." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Vivian said, keeping the revolver steady despite her racing heart. "Where are the others?" "Setting up a little surprise for your boyfriend." Jenks took a step into the room. "Now be smart and put down the gun before you hurt yourself." "I know how to use this," she warned. "Rhett taught me." "Of course he did." Jenks smirked. "But do you have the stomach to pull the trigger? To watch a man die in front of you? Because I don't think you do." He took another step forward, and Vivian knew it was now or never. She squeezed the trigger. The report was deafening in the small room. Jenks staggered back, clutching his shoulder, his face contorted with pain and rage. "You little bitch," he snarled, lunging forward despite his injury. Vivian fired again, but in her panic, the shot went wide. Before she could aim a third time, Jenks was upon her, knocking the revolver from her hand and sending it skittering across the floor. His wounded arm hung uselessly at his side, but his other hand gripped her throat, pushing her against the wall. "You've caused me nothing but trouble," he growled, his face inches from hers. "But you're still useful as bait. Tucker will come running when he hears I've got his woman." Vivian struggled against his grip, clawing at his hand, fighting for breath. Through the roaring in her ears, she heard shouts from outside, the sound of running feet. "Jenks," came a voice from the main office. "We gotta go. Someone heard the shots." Jenks cursed, releasing her throat to grab her arm instead. "You're coming with me. One way or another." Gasping for air, Vivian fought with renewed desperation. Her hand found the small desk beside her, fingers closing around the only weapon available, an oil lamp. With all her strength, she swung it at Jenks's head. Glass shattered. Oil splashed across his face and chest. In the instant of his surprise, Vivian tore free of his grasp and dove for the revolver, rolling across the floor to grab it. "Jenks, come on!" his companion shouted again. Blinded and enraged, Jenks stumbled toward the sound of his friend's voice. Vivian raised the revolver, her hands shaking but her aim sure this time. "Stop," she commanded, "or I swear to God I'll shoot you where you stand." Jenks froze, then slowly turned toward her voice. "You don't have it in you," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his tone. "Try me." Vivian's finger tightened on the trigger. "I've just learned my fiancé might be riding into a trap set by your men. I have absolutely nothing to lose." For a tense moment, neither moved. Then, from outside, came the sound of horses approaching at a gallop. "Sheriff's coming back," Jenks's companion cried. "I'm getting out of here." The sound of retreating footsteps told Vivian the companion had fled, leaving Jenks alone. The wounded man glared at her through the oil dripping down his face. "This isn't over," he growled, backing toward the door. "Yes, it is," Vivian replied, holding the revolver steady. "Because either you surrender now, or I put a bullet in you and save the hangman the trouble." Whether Jenks would have surrendered or made a final desperate move, Vivian never found out. At that moment, the office door burst open, and Sheriff Everett rushed in, followed by Rhett and two other deputies. Vivian. Rhett's voice was raw with fear as he took in the scene. Deputy Bailey unconscious or worse at his desk, Jenks covered in oil and bleeding from the shoulder, Vivian with the revolver trained on him. "I'm all right," she called, not taking her eyes off Jenks. "But his friends are setting a trap for the payroll shipment tomorrow." "We know," Sheriff Everett said, moving to disarm and restrain Jenks. "We caught them setting up the ambush. That's why we came back early." Only when Jenks was securely in custody did Vivian lower the revolver. Her hands were shaking so badly now that Rhett had to gently take the weapon from her, just as he had done on the street days earlier. "You're bleeding," he said, noticing a cut on her cheek where glass from the lamp had struck her. "It's nothing." She looked past him to where deputies were tending to Bailey. "Is he?" "He'll live," one of the deputies reported. "Took a nasty blow to the head, but he's breathing steady." Relief washed over Vivian, followed by a wave of exhaustion so profound that her knees buckled. Rhett caught her, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. "It's over now. You're safe." She clung to him, burying her face against his shoulder. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "When he said they'd set a trap." "We were ready for them," Rhett assured her, "caught them by surprise. No one was hurt on our side." Sheriff Everett approached, his expression grim but relieved. "Miss Lockhart, you showed remarkable courage tonight. Few men, let alone women, would have handled themselves so well against Jenks." "I had a good teacher," she said, glancing at Rhett. "Take her home, Tucker," the sheriff instructed. "We'll handle things here, and take tomorrow off. You've both earned it." Rhett carried Vivian to the hotel, ignoring the curious stares of the night clerk as they passed through the lobby. In their room, he gently cleaned the cut on her cheek and helped her change into a nightgown, his touch reverent, as if afraid she might break. "I'm not made of glass, you know," she said as he tucked her into bed. "I know." He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "But I came so close to losing you tonight, when we caught those men at the ambush site and they told us Jenks had gone after you." He shook his head, unable to finish. "But you didn't lose me," Vivian said, squeezing his hand. "And I didn't lose you. That's all that matters now." Rhett leaned down to kiss her softly. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is the first day of our new life together." True to his word, the next day marked a new beginning. With Jenks and his men in custody and the threat removed, Vivian and Rhett could finally focus on their future together. They spent the morning visiting the small house on Cedar Street that was available for rent, agreeing immediately that it was perfect for them. In the afternoon, they met with Reverend Collins at the local church to discuss their wedding. The Reverend, a kind elderly man who had heard of their ordeal, suggested a simple ceremony the following Sunday. "No sense in waiting when you've found the right person," he said with a knowing smile. "And from what I hear, you two have more than proven your commitment to each other." 3 weeks later, on a perfect autumn day, Vivian Lockhart became Vivian Tucker in a ceremony attended by half the town. She wore a dress of her own design, and making ivory satin with delicate lace trim, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the hills surrounding Kingston. Mr. Hollies gave her away. Wilbur served as Rhett's best man, and Sheriff Everett stood proudly in the front row. Even young Deputy Bailey, recovered from his injuries, attended with a bandage still wrapped around his head. As they exchanged vows, Vivian thought of how far she had come from the frightened young woman who had left St. Louis 3 years earlier. She had found not only independence, but also love, protection, and a true partner with whom to build her dreams. The reception was held at the Silver Spur, transformed for the occasion with white bunting and flowers. Mr. Hollies had insisted on hosting, declaring it the least he could do for the couple who had rid Kingston of its worst criminals. As the celebration wound down, Rhett led Vivian onto the small space cleared for dancing. He held her close as they swayed to the music of a local fiddler, his lips brushing her ear. "Happy, Mrs. Tucker?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you?" "I found everything I never knew I was looking for in a Kingston saloon," he said, smiling against her hair. "How could I be anything but happy?" Later that night, in the privacy of their new home, they celebrated their union in more intimate ways, discovering each other fully for the first time. Vivian found in Rhett a gentle, attentive lover who treated her body with the same reverence he showed her heart. As they lay tangled together afterward, Rhett traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have something for you," he said, reaching for his discarded vest. From the pocket, he withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I meant to give this to you earlier, but the moment never seemed right." Vivian sat up, pulling the sheet around her as Rhett emptied the pouch into his palm. A ring gleamed in the lamplight, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained, taking her hand. "The only thing I managed to salvage from our home after the war. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right woman to wear it." Tears filled Vivian's eyes as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, admiring how the diamond caught the light. "Thank you for keeping it for me, even before you knew me." "Perhaps I always knew you were out there somewhere," Rhett said, pulling her back into his arms. "I just had to find you." Epilogue. 5 years later, the bell above the door of Vivian's Designs jingled merrily as Rhett entered, his deputy's badge gleaming on his chest. A small girl with auburn hair and her father's blue eyes raced toward him, arms outstretched. "Papa." 4-year-old Elizabeth cried as Rhett swept her into the air. "Mama's making a pretty dress for Mrs. Mayer." "Is she now?" Rhett smiled, settling his daughter on his hip as he approached the counter where Vivian was measuring fabric. "And is my beautiful wife too busy for a kiss from her adoring husband?" Vivian looked up, her face glowing with health and happiness. In the 5 years since their wedding, she had established the most successful dress shop in Kingston, now catering to clients from as far away as Carson City. Her designs were known throughout the territory for their elegance and quality. "Never too busy for that," she said, meeting him halfway for a kiss that, even after 5 years, still made her heart race. "How was your day?" "Quiet. Kingston's become a respectable town these days." Rhett set Elizabeth down, watching as she returned to her small table in the corner where she was busy with colored pencils and paper. "Sheriff Everett's talking about retiring next year. Says he'll recommend me for the position." "Sheriff Tucker." Vivian tested the title. "It has a nice ring to it." "Almost as nice as Mrs. Tucker," Rhett replied, his hand coming to rest on the gentle swell of her stomach. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. Much better. The morning sickness seems to be easing." She placed her hand over his. "Dr. Williams says everything looks perfect." Just another 4 months to go. Rhett's expression softened as he thought of their second child due in the spring. "Elizabeth is hoping for a sister. I told her brothers are quite acceptable too. She'll love either, once they arrive." Vivian glanced at their daughter, now deeply absorbed in her drawing. "She has your protective instincts, you know. Yesterday she told Mrs. Winter's cat that it was under her protection when the blacksmith's dog came too close." Rhett laughed, remembering those words he'd spoken in the Silver Spur 5 years earlier. "Like father, like daughter, I suppose." As if sensing they were talking about her, Elizabeth looked up. "Papa, will you tell me the story tonight? The one about how you saved Mama from the bad men." It had become a favorite bedtime tale, carefully edited for young ears. The real Jenks had been hanged for his crimes 3 months after their wedding, but in the story version he was simply taken to jail, where he learned the error of his ways. "Of course, sweetheart," Rhett promised. "But first, let's help Mama close up shop and head home for dinner. I believe Mrs. Chen is expecting us at the restaurant tonight." The Chinese restaurant had become a favorite of theirs, the owners having arrived in Kingston shortly after their wedding. Like so many in town, the Chen family had found a safe haven and opportunity in the growing community. As they walked home later that evening, Elizabeth between them holding both their hands, Vivian reflected on how much had changed since that night at the Silver Spur. Kingston had grown into a proper town, with a school, a bank, and even a small theater. The saloon still stood, though Mr. Hollies had retired last year, selling the business to Wilbur, who had promptly hired a young woman named Clara to take Vivian's old position. Their house on Cedar Street had expanded with their family, with Rhett adding rooms as needed. The latest addition, a nursery for the coming baby, was nearly complete, painted a cheerful yellow that would suit either a boy or girl. That night, after Elizabeth was tucked into bed with her favorite story told once again, Vivian and Rhett sat on their front porch, watching the stars appear over the Nevada mountains. "You ever regret it?" Rhett asked suddenly. "Staying in Kingston instead of going to St. Louis? You could have had a bigger shop, more prestigious clients." Vivian leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Not for a single moment. St. Louis didn't have you. Is that all it takes to make you happy? Me, you, our children, our home, my shop." She smiled up at him. "What more could any woman want?" Rhett kissed her tenderly. "I ask myself every day what I did to deserve you. You cleared a room of drunk minors and said I was under your protection," Vivian reminded him, her eyes twinkling. "And you've been protecting me, protecting us ever since." As night fell completely over Kingston, they remained on the porch, hands entwined, hearts full, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other everything they never knew they were searching for: safety, love, and a future bright with promise. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed them that night, Rhett whispered against Vivian's hair, "I love you, Mrs. Tucker, today and always." "And I love you," she replied, nestling closer to him. "My protector, my heart, my home."